Hey, Razfax here. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Primary Arms SLx 1X microprism with red illuminated ACSS. Yeah, I'm just going to call it the Gen 2 Cyclops. As per usual, I'll be dividing this up into 3 sections. The overview, where I talk about the features. Observations, where I talk about what I noticed during the review cycle. And finally, the opinion, where I earned those dislikes. My thoughts on the optic, what I thought it did well, what I thought it didn't do well, and other opinion-y things. I've had this optic for approximately 3.5 months, and for about 1,100 rounds, 950 of which was with this 9mm PDW, and the rest of which was with a 5.56 rifle. Furthermore, a friend bought one as well, and he ran it for about 250 rounds with his AR, and we had similar opinions on the matter. The Cyclops is a Prism Optic, so think ACOG, but instead of 4x, you get 1x. Or, in practice, it's an LPVO that has 1x, but instead of a max magnification, you get a drastically improved eye box, eye relief, reduced weight and size, and some other features I'll get into. And boy, speaking of size, this thing is compact, impressively so. Basically a Trigicon MRO sized. Being a scope, it also has an etched reticle, meaning no batteries needed. No astigmatism issues. This is a big deal to a lot more people than I initially thought. Too much Game Boy Advance under the covers when we were young, I guess. The Cyclops has 12 brightness settings, 3 of which are night vision settings, with a caveat, more on that later. This doesn't have off settings between the brightness level, but the dial is stiff enough that you can kind of just hover it between different settings and it will turn off. But you'll generally skip this because it's got a shake awake feature, meaning if you set it down, it'll turn off and then it'll turn back on again when you pick it up, which is an excellent battery saver. Speaking of excellent battery saver, this thing has a ridiculous battery life, owing in part to it being a prism. Compared to a red dot, it's nothing special, but when you get used to LPVOs, which have battery lives measured in borderline seconds, this is pretty nice. You also get a smorgasbord. Do people still say smorgasbord? You get a plethora of mounting options, allowing you to mount this in a variety of different ways. They're reversible, so you can have different positions, heights, forward or rear cantilever, you name it. You can also mount it on an ACOG mini pattern, but honestly at this price point and the provided mounts, why? The reticle, as mentioned, is the ACSS reticle, which has, for whatever reason, developed a cult following. But it seems to be an okay match here, adding some level of versatility. Alright, but that's actually not an inconsequential amount of features for a little prism like this. Oh, and that brings us to the best part. You can have this for about $250 with, a little bit added for shipping. Not too shabby. I'll do my best here and talk about a lot of this with an objective manner, but it's a scope red dot thing, so a lot of this is going to be somewhat opinionated, so yeah, beware, I guess. Brightness level is acceptable, I'll say. It's not really red dot bright as many claim, but it's certainly daylight bright. That is, it turns the reticle red, but you don't get that fluorescent effect you might get on red dots or bright LPVOs. This will really depend on your area. For me, in nuclear hot desert environments, it's basically gone on a normal day. However, once it's overcast, it actually begins to fluoresce a little. It's also bright enough that in home defense usage, if you turn on your gazillion lumen retina melting light of choice, you can actually still see the reticle and the black doesn't just get washed out. The reticle isn't evenly illuminated when you begin to wash it out. It's mostly confined to the outer horseshoe, so not a deal breaker and even a major negative. Since the reticle design is a much larger design, this lack of illumination isn't felt as harshly as, say, on other optics, which rely on projecting a single dot as bright as possible to try to imitate a red dot, like most LPVOs seem to do. Thus, this isn't really as big of a deal here. Eye box, one of the bigger selling points. You can get as close as you'd like with this thing while still having a resolved image. When you back up, when you back up, okay, you'll have a clearer image till about 8 inches. From there, you will see the image begin to collapse, like you'll see little dark spots on like the 9 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and 6 o'clock for some reason, but that will not grow anymore, and then you can back up farther. No, farther. Yeah, I actually don't know how far you can go with this thing, but you can go really far, and the image will still be good enough to be functional. Now, I wouldn't really plan on running this on an 8K gas block, but you could. Left to right, depending on your position, it is at worst about 3/4. That is, the image or the reticle begins to fade at 3/4 and you get a black, thing. You guys have used scopes. And at the best position, which is generally a little closer, it gets to about 99% edge-to-edge visibility. So well in excess of any LPVO, scope, whatever on the market. Now, it's worth noting that the reticle takes up a larger percentage of the housing the further you move away from it. Sort of like how an ear tech apparently grows to encompass the housing the farther out you are. So you're going to get a pretty crowded sight picture if you cram this thing all the way up on the front of your rifle. The optimal position seems roughly on par with most scopes, right? Closer to your face, even though you do have that eye box and versatility of technically putting it anywhere you want. This gives you a good ratio of reticle size to housing size, but this is once again preference here, so I don't know. Put it where you want. Follow your dreams. The reticle was acceptable, a little better than I expected actually. You can use the tip of the chevron as an infinitely fine aiming point, and I found it really clicked when I was aiming at very small targets like a 2-inch swinger at about 20 yards, right? Perfect there. Out far, once again, this is opinion, but I find the chevron isn't a great option for a 1x optic at beyond 50 yards. The concept of using a chevron with a magnified optic like the ACOG or primary arms is iffy at best because the chevron takes up a large percentage of the target when you begin to have your bullet drop, right? And it's functional with 1-6x primary arms designs like the other ACSS or the ACOG because you're magnified, thus the target appears bigger, so it's not as big of a deal. However, for a 1x style optic, I find the chevron generally takes up a little too much space. I wish it was a little smaller, especially since that large outer circle already draws your eyes to it so well. With a red dot, you can generally dim the dot so it becomes translucent, so it's even worse than a red dot in my opinion in this regard. Even on the 9mm pistol, I was having issues engaging 4-inch swingers at 50 to 100 yards because my holdover had the chevron partially obscuring the target, making it a little difficult. But that's the cost of getting a chevron. I personally wish they would have gone with a smaller chevron here. The outer ring did its job. It's an overt, large aiming thing that acts as a rapid flash reticle to help you track during recoil, draw your eye to the center chevron, especially when illumination isn't active or the illumination gets washed out. I wish they dimmed the volume a little bit, made it thinner, that is. Bit bold right now, bold and etched, but it's not terrible by any means. An interesting thing to consider, with a lot of red dot sights, they come in at roughly 2 MOA, but you can turn up the brightness level to increase the apparent size as the red dot begins to bloom out, so you get a bigger aiming point. With the Cyclops, while you can bloom out the illumination, assuming it's not too bright out, you'll never really get to the situation where the reticle grows in apparent size. It'll always be roughly or almost exactly the same size. This is neither a good nor bad thing, since there are situations where you want to grow your reticle, but there are also situations where you want a really bright reticle, but you don't want your reticle to grow, right? So this is just the aspect to consider. This thing has 1 MOA adjustments and has been the complaint of many. I don't think it matters too much on a PDW 9mm setup. You're going to be well outside of your engagement range before this begins to matter. However, if you want to really push it out and you're competent with an AR-15 or any other 5.56 rifle, I guess, it's going to begin to become an issue at approximately like 300 yards. The diopter, or the focus ring, as many call it, is dummy stiff and literally requires a tool to break it free the first time, which is fine in most circumstances considering this is a set it and forget it type of deal, but it's nice that they included the ability to adjust the focus here. It might actually end up being an issue though, is under night vision. Because this is a scope, it suffers from the same thing all scopes suffer from, regardless of eye box. It doesn't really work under night vision for passive aiming due to a focal mismatch. This, for at least 3 people that I've tried it with, is a blurry fucking mess under night vision.
Oh yeah, that's awful.
Unusable. Note, the primary arms dude in one of my my first looks video on this commented that it was fine for everyone that tested it on his end, right, on primary arms end, but he didn't really elaborate beyond that, which means they either have superhumans with perfect vision that result in the perfect focal combination at primary arms, or they focus the night vision device to the optic, which is more likely, or they focus the optic to the night vision device, which is also quite likely. But both of these are dumb as fuck for reasons I probably won't get into. Or maybe I ended up with 2 broken Cyclopses. Who knows? Take your pick. Choose wisely. Nothing lies in the balance, except maybe your wallet. But yeah, doesn't work under night vision. Finally, the main reason why someone would want to buy this guy, or should want to buy this guy. Astigmatism. I have astigmatism. My friends have astigmatism. I'm pretty sure my dog has astigmatism. Everyone has astigmatism. The gene pool is fucked and we need to start over. Till we start over though, which should be any day now, this thing provides a clear and crisp image. Even when you turn the illumination on, you get no star blooming effect. Yep, that's the nature of an etched reticle. Right? This works as a cure, air quotes, to astigmatism. Opinion. Okay, my thoughts. I think this is actually fairly straightforward for once. And I'm going to try to answer the question of if you should buy this and if this is a good analog to buy instead of a 1x red dot sight. I can't believe I have to state this, but this is apparently a thing that came up last video. But this is a 1x sight. A red dot and holographic is a 1x sight. You buy either of them with the same goal, to shoot things at 1x with a small profile. So I'm going to be doing a lot of comparison on how this tracks or compares to a red dot. Because people that are buying this are either buying this or a red dot. If that is too hard of a concept to grasp, let's do it. Round 2, down in the comments, 62 comment thread, here we go. Okay, assuming you are deciding between this and a budget red dot, like a Halcyon 403 or something like it, here are the questions you need to ask. Do you want to passively aim under night vision? Yes? Instant disqualification, don't buy it. Do you have perfect vision and you don't care about having a batteryless design? Yes? Don't buy it. Do you have minor astigmatism, but you can still use a red dot quite effectively? It just looks kind of weird. And you, once again, don't care about a batteryless design? Yes? Don't buy it. The flip side. You have disability levels of astigmatism. Red dots, holographics, whatever, are completely unusable. This will be basically your only options outside of LPVOs, so yes. You have debilitating astigmatism, buy this. Did you read 1 second after and have very elevated concerns about EMPs wiping out all of existence, including your red dot sights? Buy this. Or buy an LPVO, but yeah, buy this. I know people are going to mention durabilities, but I don't know, man. I'm not sure I'm sold on that. Even budget red dots are extremely durable nowadays, so I'm not really sure that's a selling point here. Anyway, what am I going to do with mine? Personally, for me, I don't think this is a bad optic by any stretch, and I do have astigmatism, but it's not so bad for me that I care to continue owning this optic. Though I've toyed with the concept of just leaving this in the closet, especially at its price point, and keeping it as a backup aiming device. But that's the thing, I can use a red dot just fine, and while the chevron design is useful sometimes, with the ultra-fine aiming point, I simply just prefer a red dot. I think a red dot is more versatile, more efficient. I like the flexibility of being able to passively aim under nubs. I like red dot bright fluorescent illumination over etched reticle designs, at least on 1X. LPVOs are a different story. And no matter how close this is to a red dot-like performance in terms of eye box, it still behaves somewhat like a scope. And since I don't value the batteryless design, this doesn't really offer me anything over choosing this over red dot. TLDR, even if you ignored the somewhat big flaw of not being able to aim under night vision with this device, making up some bullshit gutsy feely numbers, I'd say this is about 80 to 90% as good as a red dot, depending on the red dot. And since I don't care for the upsides, this brings nothing else to the table to justify that 10 to 20% loss in performance. Like a certain someone said, I think a lot of people overvalue how much their astigmatism affects them, but ultimately that is your call to make, and if it affects you greatly, this is the optic for you. I hope you enjoyed this video. Been growing a lot recently, and legit, one of the highlights of my mediocre day is waking up, reading YouTube comments while drinking some coffee in the morning, having people offer insight, or just thanking me for giving some value added for their purchasing decision. Or just shitposting. I don't know. Whatever. Remember, I'm just a dude doing videos on the internet. This is all pretty fun for me, and there's a very good chance I'm not always right. I'm just hoping to provide some information on how my experience was to help you out make a decision when you buy stuff. Anyways, see you guys around. New snacks. Look at the size of these things. Roll over.